Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, Securing Your Cloud Environment with Endpoint and Network Detection and Response, EDR, NDR Technologies, sponsored by AWS Marketplace. My name is Jennifer Lynn with the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Matt Bromley, SANS instructor, and Nam Lee, AWS Security Specialist Leader. If during the webcast you have questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. We will be answering them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can also complete the survey that will be sent out at the end of this webinar if you wish to learn more about any specific solutions that were mentioned during this webinar. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Excited to have you here today. And as we discussed, or as Jennifer explained when we got things started off here, today we're going to be talking about securing your cloud environment, your AWS environments with EDR and NDR technologies. Now, I am excited to be joined by Nam, and we're going to be bringing him on a little bit later to talk about some of the AWS Marketplace specific options and some resources that are available to you. And I really want to kind of start to set the stage about the problem that we want to address here. And we're going to start doing that by looking at enterprise makeup. Now, if you've seen us on webcast before, you know that we've already got a pretty good understanding of just how big, how explosive, how important the cloud is becoming to organizations out there. But I want to make sure we take a moment just to recognize just how popular that is and what that means from an attack surface. And then I want to do a little bit of a comparison from an EDR and NDR perspective. I want to do a then versus a now. And I want to reflect on that enterprise makeup to talk about how technologies have changed and maybe what we should be looking forward to or what we should be looking for in the future. And then we're going to get into the AWS specifics. We've got a case study to wrap it up. We're going to walk into next steps, and then I'm going to hand it over to Nam to walk us through some of the solutions available in the AWS Marketplace, followed again by some more case studies or some customer success stories to hear about just how this type of implementation has worked for folks out there in the field. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the enterprise makeup. Now, when we started putting the white paper together to go along with this webcast, we first took the approach of what does it look like in a modern organization these days, or the modern enterprise, as we've quoted it before as well. And we have to kind of look and reflect on what used to be there, because that's our foundation, but it also helps us understand how we got to where we are now. So the first thing I look at is enterprise makeup. Is I say, what did security postures look like? And I say for years, they've been based on defenses at the endpoint and network levels. And this should not come as any surprise to anyone whatsoever. We've got tangible endpoints, tangible assets, workstations, laptops, servers, a network switch, an actual physical perimeter, data centers I can go touch. This is years and years and years ago. We now know, or not know, but we've witnessed and seen organizations completely change. But with regards to those physical proximity, those physical assets, if you will, a lot of organizations built their security posture around that. And in fact, we have a wide range of advanced detection and response technologies out there. There are a slew of vendors that can be used to help get insight, detect threats, respond to them, automation, skill capabilities, logging, all sorts of things out there. But a lot of this is actually catered towards on-prem deployments. They make an assumption that you're going to have CPU cycles. They make an assumption that your file server is a server. They make an assumption that a lot of the traditional aspects of computing, of spoken hub computing, of central kind of protected inside of a perimeter computing are there. And I think that unfortunately has created a little bit of a gap, because enterprises now comprise of a combination of those legacy on-prem assets. And yes, I'm calling on-prem assets a legacy for a security perspective. You'll see why in just a moment. But it's a combination of on-prem and AWS assets, with many organizations trending towards the latter. Cloud deployments are growing every single day. Third-party applications, third-party integrations, third-party reliance, all sorts of features and functionality from a third-party or from a cloud perspective are growing on a daily basis. Now, that's not to say that we aren't expanding some of our on-prem or physical footprint, but of course, that creates a few things that we need to ask our security team, or things that we need to ask our security posture. For example, do we have the same type of visibility in AWS as we do on-prem? From a security perspective, I think that's a pretty valid question to be asked. If most of my organization is moving their operations to a cloud provider or a cloud service, well, how does that change my visibility? How does that change my ability to detect and respond to threats? Most of the time, unfortunately, the answer is no. There is not the same type of visibility in AWS as we do on-prem. Now, this creates a little bit of a he said, she said, finger pointing situation, because sometimes folks will come back and they will say, well, the same type of telemetry is not available, therefore my visibility is less. They might say that, well, we don't have the ability to deploy to the cloud. We don't understand how to put any sort of detection and response technologies there. Or they may just come back and say, yeah, that's a risk, and we accept that risk. And most of the time, that's what I see happen. A lot of teams deal with that gap by simply just dealing with it. Here's the problem with that. You're right. You may not have the same capabilities in the cloud that you do on an on-prem asset. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But more importantly, if you recognize there's a security gap, or you recognize there's a problem with visibility, or that there's not an on par level, there's not parity in what we're looking at here, my ability to detect and respond inside of one area is not as strong as the others, well, then I'd argue you've just determined the next quarter, the next half year, the next year worth of goals for the security team. But more importantly, you've also identified the fact that you're creating a gap, or you're allowing a gap to exist that bad actors are more than happy to walk through. And we see this time and time and time again. Data breaches, intrusions, incidents happening because of something the organization knew about and either decided not to mitigate the risk away, they chose to just ignore it, or the infrastructure was way outside of the security team's monitoring and detection capabilities. And that latter one, that's the one where I see a lot of folks going from a cloud perspective. Now, this does bring us, of course, into our comparison of then versus now, because if I've got these massive organizations and I've got these big on-prem inside of a perimeter setups, and I understand how these things are constructed together, well, then how does that impact my endpoint and my network detection and response technologies? And a lot of security postures, again, are rooted around the physicality of those on-prem assets. That means my employees have those physical assets. Servers are in a data center somewhere. I can actually point or go touch that particular system if I need to. Of course, that raises the obvious question. The question that we've been asking all this webcast thus far is, hey, we've got all these different assets in place. Servers are physical boxes in a certain area. Are we able to actually do the same thing? Are we able to have the same exact effect inside of AWS? More and more organizations move there, but does their security posture follow? And that's really the quintessential question that we're looking at here. Your posture has changed. Has your security assessment of that posture, has your security capabilities followed along with it? And this brings me back to kind of our earlier concept of what the enterprise used to look like versus what it looks like now. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times organizations get stuck in a place where the business moves at a rate that the security team might not be able to keep up with, might not be able to go and, they might not be able to keep up with the rate that the business is growing. And this creates a massive issue for security teams, because your security posture, which was built around an earlier premise, now begins to crumble. I start placing assets in an area where you don't have visibility. I start placing assets in an area where you don't have the ability to detect and respond to incidents. I start having adversaries show up in places where you don't have detection and response capabilities. And now I have parts of the organization exposed to risks, exposed to intrusions, exposed to bad actors, and I don't have any way for my highly capable security team to defend against them. And that's the quintessential issue that we want to make sure we address today, but also show you doesn't have to exist, doesn't have to be there. So when I talk about EDR then versus now, I then had to, of course, talk about the now part. Well, Matt, this is great. We get it. You spent plenty of time outlining the problem statement. How do we then go forward? What's next for us? And I think there are actually multiple ways we can kind of bring this together. The first way is I like to break down these components into a security model, but put them into definitions of assets of something I'm much more familiar with. For example, a lot of organizations will deploy virtual machines in the cloud or compute or EC2 instances. Well, that's great. That's a virtual machine. That is a computer for all intents and logical purposes. There is no reason I should be able to have an on-prem agent-based EDR technology and not route my EC2 or my virtual instances into that same thing. In fact, we're going to look at a vendor who provides that sort of functionality in just a few minutes here. But then let's go outside of those compute or those EC2 instances. Let's break outside of the virtual machines. And instead, let's say, well, what about some of the other assets I might have out there? Perhaps one of the other more popular AWS capabilities are those S3 buckets. The ability to get that kind of file storage, that cloud accessible file storage. It's not really a file server, but my employees or my users can use it the same way. We can dump and store files in there. Well, I like the idea here that what if I considered and looked at that asset the same way I would look at a file server or a file storage solution? So perhaps if I break down the components into something that is more familiar to my security posture, the need to protect them stays the same. It's the approach that has to change. So if I take an S3 bucket and I break it down and I say, well, it's really just a storage facility or it's a storage container. It's a place that I can put data and files into. Well, then the same types of security that I would expect to apply to a file storage location should apply to an S3 bucket as well. I would expect to see permissions, content declarations, content matching. Do I have sensitive data leaving? What are the access permissions? Who can do what? Who can place there? Who can read there? My assessment would be the exact same for a file server inside of an environment as well. If I were to pop up a file server, I would say who has access to it? How do they need access to it? What level of granularity? How do I connect to this thing? How do I prevent others who are not supposed to have access from not connecting to it? There's all sorts of terms and questions that we'd line up for on-prem assets, but cloud assets a lot of times just get deployed without little care about them. So let's take a look at how we can break these things down, because now that we've talked about how to better integrate different types of AWS assets into my security posture by breaking down into the definition of what they are, we can now look at ways that EDR and NDR technologies are actually still available to us. So I'm going to focus on the EDR side of things at first. And I'm very happy to say that this was actually one of the easier parts to write of this paper because we got to lean on the beauty of the AWS marketplace. Now I know we're going to hear much more about it later on in this presentation, but being able to jump into the AWS marketplace and do a quick search for EDR, NDR, or MDR technologies pulls up reputable vendors offering a really, really solid product instead of me needing to roll my own, or instead of me maintaining some visibility gap and just saying, we're never going to know. Instead, I can jump right into the AWS marketplace and get an idea of what's available and what's there. Now, admittedly, and I'm looking at my second bullet down here, admittedly, many of these offerings begin at the EC2 instance, relying on agents to be deployed. But the nice thing about that is I've just crossed one of the other bridges that we see inside of information security. I've just found ways to merge my on-prem and my cloud assets together. And that's one of the other things that I like about this approach is I can go deploy in the cloud all I want. My on-prem shouldn't be this separate area, and my security team now has to manage two quote unquote physical areas of the organization. Instead, I would rather we have one place we do that from. And that's exactly what solutions like these are meant to do. We're going to look at something like CrowdStrike, for example, offers their Falcon endpoint or their Falcon cloud security, which allows me to have that single cloud-based platform that all of my systems connect into, physical, virtual, and EC2 instances or other things run inside of the cloud. One of the other nice benefits here is I can very, very quickly go from an EDR solution to an MDR solution, a managed detection and response. So whereas that EDR solution may be a little more hands-on or a little more self-guided, the MDR is going to bring an expert into my environment, quote unquote, into my environment, and allow me to very quickly get third-party expertise on the things going through my environment. This allows a team to quickly go, and I'm talking if I've got 500 endpoints sitting up, 500 EC2 instances in AWS, and I have no security around them whatsoever. With the click of a button, the rollout of a few agents, and perhaps a few configuration options, I then now have the ability to go from no security or no SOC to full managed services, threat hunting, insights, detections, response capabilities, so on and so forth. I can force multiply my security team in a day. And that's the other nice thing that I like about this approach. Because if you remember, we talked about some of the differences between cloud and on-prem. Deploying across on-prem is a very, very cumbersome thing. We've got to get physical boxes installed. We've got to go into the server room. We've got to deploy agents, group policies, get IT permissions, so on and so forth. If I build an EDR tool or an EDR agent into my gold image for my EC2 instances, guess what? As soon as it turns on, it's checking in, and I know exactly what's happening. I can deploy these things much faster and take advantage of one of the inherent benefits of the cloud. Now we've got to break a little bit outside of EC2 instances, because if we stick just with virtual machines, all we've done is we've taken the same technology, that agent-based technology, and ported it into the cloud. That's not where we want to be. Instead, I would rather take a look across the marketplace at some of the other vendors that help me monitor some of the other assets that are out there. And I've got a screenshot as well as a description of at least one vendor here that helps me bring together multiple different types of assets into one place. So for example, I might say to myself, well, I've got a pretty big AWS footprint. I'm using computer EC2 instances. I've got S3 buckets. Obviously, we've got IAM because that's our permissions for everything. We've got domains out here. We're monitoring all sorts of network traffic. There's all sorts of things happening. I want to bring all of these into one place. Great. I can go and deploy an MDR combo tool or almost a correlation tool in the cloud that will bring my typical EDR, NDR technologies from an on-prem perspective into one place. They're also going to couple that with monitoring the cloud environment specifically, meaning they might tap into the logs, increase the level of granularity. I'm going to get real-time insight into what's happening in my AWS instance rather than historical or self-driven or self-guided. So being able to bring all of these products into one place, well, this is the dream, I think, for any security team, because what does it do? It opens up our ability to look at the environment holistically. Not only that, it also then allows us to detect adversary activity across these different assets as well. It gives my security team focus. It says we need to go and address open S3 buckets. We've got container issues. We've got loose permissions running around IAM. We've got all sorts of things that need to be audited and checked on and rectified. My security team has purpose, and they know what to look for next. They know what to go fix, which is exactly where I want them to be. And I think there's a really good EDR offering in the marketplace that can help teams get there quickly. Taking a look at the NDR side of things, from an NDR perspective, this is where it gets a little trickier. Because yes, packets do traverse the internet as well as the same way that they do internal and external networks. But the problem is tapping into AWS as a whole is not really anything any of us really want to get into. We need a significant sized team of sensors to do that. Even then, I don't think anyone wants to brunt the cost or wants that much visibility. Instead, what I want to be able to do is detect into my networks, my AWS driven networks. And that's actually fairly trivial to do. There are, once again, technologies that are available on the marketplace that I can do to bring these capabilities together. Furthermore, there are also technologies that do both, meaning there are some available that take a look at EDR and NDR capabilities and combine them into, you know what, we've got a really robust network monitoring capability, and we've got a really robust endpoint agent. We're going to bring these two things together. From a security perspective, I like this because I get all my telemetry, all my detections, all my concerns, all my issues in one place, and I can look at them accordingly. I'm always going to be a fan of a holistic approach. And if there's a way for me to combine all my AWS with all my on-prem, my security team's now got the best vantage point ever. I dare an adversary to try and slip past us because we can see everything all in one place. But we've got to take the step and integrate AWS technologies, number one. We've got to change our approach in thinking of those technologies, number two. And last but not least, number three, we also need to be able to understand the difference between how adversaries might come after an AWS asset versus how they might come after an on-prem asset. Let's look at a couple of case studies to help identify this. So the first one I drew up, and this one admittedly relies on some native technology that you can find in AWS. This is a web application or a potential web application breach here. Now, I went pretty low and pretty easy on our first case study here, because if anyone's watching this and you've got web applications deployed out there, you've got various other tools, you're managing an API, or you've got load balancers, you're using different AWS tools out there to help guide your business or help promote your site or deliver services, you need to understand some of the functionality you've got built in as well. And if we were on-prem and we launched a web app, we might look at all sorts of technologies to put in front of this thing, a NIDS or a NIPS, or we might pipe traffic off to the side. We're going to put firewalls and web application firewalls out there. We might load balance traffic. We're going to do all sorts of things to mitigate the risk to a web app that we're hosting ourselves. Why on earth would we take that away from a cloud hosted or an AWS hosted web app as well? That's exactly what this screenshot looks like. AWS actually has some built-in tooling capabilities. Web application firewall, and a firewall manager to help manage a fleet of AWS WAF deployments. This is built in. Not saying it's free, I'm saying it's already there and already available. So I like the fact, and kudos to the AWS team for recognizing this was needed and building a really good framework on top of products that are already in place. The second case study we'll look at, this is one that I've seen in many organizations before, where we've got a combination of assets in the cloud and a combination of assets on-prem that are linked together via some way, shape, or form. Now, this may be done from a domain perspective. You may have like an Azure Active Directory, which again is a cloud-hosted Active Directory, not in any other provider, but more focused on a Microsoft setup that brings those different assets together. I see this happen quite often. I see an enterprise on-prem try to connect and reach out to their cloud-based enterprise setup as well. They're going to take those AWS assets and do their best to try and rope everything in so they can take advantage of those single sign-on capabilities and take advantage of those shared usernames and hopefully take advantage of that combined telemetry. But what this does is it actually creates a really, really messy setup for the enterprise to have to deal with, primarily because you've now got multiple footprints trying to coalesce and work as one organization. In amongst all of that patchwork, adversaries will start to find their way through, because guess what? To the back end, to the security team, it may look like we're trying to combine multiple environments together. So what do we do to try and let those environments talk to each other? We create rules, or we allow traffic to go through, or we give usernames far too many permissions, or we create S3 buckets that have far too many permissions available on them so anyone can read and write from them. We let our developers deploy tools without any security concerns around them. And I end up with these two big clusters, one of them being on-prem inside of that contained environment with a decade-old security posture, and one of them in my AWS instance with who knows what security policies combined and very active channels between the two. I've got multiple technologies in one place. Some of them are vulnerable, some of them are not. So how does this help my security team? This is what I mean when I say the security posture has gotten away from the security team, is because the business has grown at a rate that supplies the customers and supplies the users, but unfortunately has not helped out with the security team. My users and my adversaries are going to treat these clusters all the same. And I run into this all the time when I'm working on with various clients. I'll see customers or I'll see employees who are working on various assets, and they may log in on their work laptop. They may hit a VPN, which is hosted somewhere. That VPN then hands them a token. That token allows them to access various different resources. Some of those resources are on local servers. Some of those resources are up in AWS. The employee doesn't know. The employee knows behind the scene. The employee doesn't know that behind the scene, there's a different, very, very, very detailed patchwork of security concepts lining these things together. All the employee knows is this is where I go to put in my time. This is where I go to submit my expenses. This is my file share. This is where I go if I need to have a webcast. This is where I go to send my email. Guess what? Adversaries look at it the exact same way. So the other case study that I looked at, and I took advantage of some of the technologies in place here, is I took a look at a tool, and we're looking at a particular vendor's tooling here that actually brings all of these different devices in together. So going beyond just deploying a simple firewall in front of my cloud footprint and saying, hey, we're good to go, we're done. Instead, I want to go a step further, and I want to say, what if we could go beyond just bringing my laptops, my workstations, my servers, and my virtual machines together? What if I could include my network devices, my on-prem network devices, the things that help drive my infrastructure? What if I could bring in VPN technology and bring in all those additional other third-party sources that allow my employees to access those resources? And all we're really doing here, folks, is we're driving towards that point of that very, very well-rounded holistic visibility into I can see what it looks like when someone enters my environment and exits my environment. And the term my environment can include as large or as small of an AWS footprint as you want. But having technology in place like an EDR or an NDR and combining those two together gives me that unique insight into what it looks like when someone enters in. And that's what we see on the right-hand side here. This is actually a screenshot from ExtraHop's Reveal X. Again, another product available on the AWS Marketplace. But this is where I can actually see the linkage between IP traffic, users, network devices, and other things that might be inside of my environment. I want to understand what does it look like as I rope all these different environments together. And that's exactly what we should be using these detection and response technologies for. So before I hand it over to the AWS Marketplace team, I want to highlight some of the points we just talked about because I think it's a very important thing for organizations to understand. Now, I will preface this slide and say that if any of you have a vast AWS footprint and you've already spent a lot of time building out your security posture, great. I'd ask you to do me a favor, make sure your security posture is keeping up with the rate of growth of the business. But for those of you who may be walking new into this, we now have a cloud footprint, what do I do about it? Here's the next steps. First off, we move, or just because I moved things to AWS does not mean we just accept that visibility gap. No, we find ways to close it up. Let's do that by redefining our asset types and finding solutions to protect them just as we would on-prem. Think back to my earlier example. If you had a file server on-prem, how would you protect it? Well, apply the same principles to an S3 bucket. Take advantage of the AWS Marketplace that's there. They make purchasing and integration very, very easy. And last but not least, a lot of times you'll hear EDR and NDR talked about as separate things. I always like to look for places or for vendors that can help me straddle both lines. If I can get insight into both, and even if it's not as good as individual, I'd rather have 275 or 280% capabilities than I would have 100 and 0. Some visibility is better than none. And look to see if you can find a way to integrate between these two different parent telemetry types to see if we can get a seamless experience, or let's see if we can go a step further and branch into different types of assets. And ask yourself the question of your environment. When someone enters my environment, can I trace them? Can I see what they interact with? Where is it on-prem? Where is it cloud from start to finish? That way, we've got a much better chance of understanding how an adversary might enter our network, where we can deploy the most effective detections, where my security team should focus their resources, and last but not least, how to keep the business secure no matter how big we grow, because we've got this part of our footprint covered. All right, with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Nam from the AWS Marketplace team. Nam, you with me?
Hey, I'm here, Matt. Thank you for this awesome presentation. Hi, everyone. Expanding on what Matt has talked about so far, so let's dive a little bit deeper into some real-world solutions and see how they play in your AWS environment. As you know, operation at scale is a must in this modern cloud environment, and it requires the highest level of automation. So whenever you spin up a new AWS account, you want to have all the tools, especially your security tools, deploy and enable in that new AWS account so that it's ready for use. And not only ready for use, but ready for use in compliance with your security standards. With Control Tower, you can pretty much level up your automation very easily. It is based on the multi-account framework that AWS recommends in the Cloud Foundation Guide. So you have the primary player account, which is your single point of control. And then every time you create a new account through account vendor machines or to account a vendor machine or enroll a new account with Service Catalog or Account Factory, you will have all the tools deployed on spot. Falcon Discovery for cloud and containers for example, has read-only access to your EC2 metadata. This minimizes the security impact to your AWS infrastructure because it calls AWS APIs on your behalf using a cross-account IAM role. And it also understands and processes your CloudTrail logs as well. This solution, it monitors your CloudTrail logs stored in your log archive account in your Amazon S3 bucket. So whenever a new log file is written to the S3 bucket, a Amazon SNS notification is sent to the SNS topic hosted in a CrowdStrike account. So what it means is that you will get alerted whenever a new AWS instance is enrolled in your environment. And then you want to utilize AWS auto-scale groups to install the CrowdStrike Falcon sensor during the virtual machine or EC2 initialization, and the AWS auto-scale lifecycle hooks to deregister the instance with CrowdStrike when you want to terminate that virtual machine or that EC2 instance. If you want to defend multiple accounts in your AWS environment, it requires a unified strategy for visibility, threat detection, and response. With Review X360, NDR, and AWS Control Tower, you and your organizations can securely expand your footprint with minimal friction caused by manually implementing guardrails or Amazon VPC traffic mirroring sections for each new account. Now, if you have tried to create guardrails or VPC traffic mirroring sections before on your new accounts, you know how intimidating it can be. So let's check this example on how Review X360 and AWS Control Tower can help you deploy and maintain a data feed in a workload account via Amazon VPC traffic mirroring. You want to make sure there's a steady stream of network data to extra hot cloud sensors because it is crucial, it is very essential to your visibility, threat detection, and response game plan. And here's how Review X administrators and users can leverage the integration. So to set up this new integration, a Review X360 administrator only needs to take these 3 steps. So they have to subscribe to the extra hot SaaS and bring your own license listing on AWS Marketplace. Then you deploy the extra hot Control Tower Lifecycle CloudFormation stack in the Control Tower management account. And then you enroll AWS accounts in your Control Tower management console, which creates a CloudFormation stack set instance based on the type of account enrolled. And the end game is mirror network traffic from EC2 and ECS workloads in your workload accounts is automatically delivered to the Review X sensor. Once you completed those 3 steps, your security teams can use Review X360 to identify and respond to advanced threats against your cloud workload. And here's the reference architecture for CrowdStrike EDR in your AWS Control Tower environment. It's the same step. It's pretty straightforward. You configure AWS Control Tower to register new AWS accounts with CrowdStrike Discover for cloud and containers. And then you configure AWS Control Tower to register new AWS accounts with CrowdStrike Horizon. And the third step is to build capabilities like automated blocking of malicious domains. You can do it via AWS Network Firewall based on CrowdStrike detection alerts or perform threat hunting delivered from CrowdStrike domain-based indicators of activities. And the last step is the Falcon integration gateway will publish detections identified by CrowdStrike Falcon for instances reside in your AWS environment to AWS Security Hub. So one of the positive or negative effects of this COVID-19 pandemic, depending on how you want to see it, is the forced transformation of work environment from on-site to remote. And thousands of Arizona state employees was forced to work remotely, requiring Cyber Command security team to quickly set up secure a secure remote work capability for employee laptops, desktop, cell phones, and tablets. And the office began rolling out CrowdStrike's Falcon endpoint protection platform security environment and Falcon Overwatch solution at the start of its fiscal year in July 2020, which is 4 months until its previous protection was about to expire. Having the dedicated support went a long way forward, facilitating a smooth transitions. That's the word of Tim Roma. Tim Roma, he's a CISO of the Arizona Department of Homeland Security. CrowdStrike provides managed endpoint protection, threat hunting, and incident response services to several public sector customers, including customers in higher education, healthcare, federal, state, and local governments. Mary Fairley, the regional sales manager for CrowdStrike, she said that they've tracked about 150 adversaries, and in doing that, we have learned the tools and techniques that they use to breach the environments. We incorporated that intelligence into the product. And the cloud-native cybersecurity company has an aggressive performance standard. CrowdStrike has a pretty aggressive performance standard in the event of any incident. 1 minute to detect, 10 minutes to triage and analyze, and 1 hour to fully resolve a problem. Falcon is powered by a lightweight agent that can be rapidly deployed to your endpoints with no reboot required or user interface for end users. CrowdStrike hosts its Falcon environment using AWS services. For example, it uses EC2 for its secure recycle compute capacity. And to gain high performance block storage while using Amazon EC2 instances, CrowdStrike also uses Amazon EBS for Apache Cassandra cluster. With 600 employees and 18 offices worldwide, and it's a pretty cool company name, Wizards of the Coast operates in a highly competitive space where speed is the key. And they really need the ability to deploy features and updates several times a day without sacrificing security. Before ReviewX Cloud, Wizards needed agents so that they can gain visibility into the traffic traversing their Amazon VPCs. Deploying agents, as many of you have already known, was complex, costly, and it definitely would create bottlenecks that slow down the development and delivery cycles. ReviewX Cloud leverages Amazon VPC traffic mirroring to collect and analyze copies of network traffic packets from AWS. So instead of only seeing that server A was talking to server B, then McDaniel, Chief Architect and Information Security Officer at Wizards of the Coast, and his team, his security team, was able to quickly drill down into what those servers were saying to each other, was how they communicate to each other. And then they can get critical information about everything from misconfigured services to potential malicious activity. And he also said the developers want to put out quality games that are fun, that are exciting, and they don't want the friction because it's a distraction for them. It slows them down, but most of all, it makes them justify what they're doing, which pretty much puts anybody on their heels. So the company needed a cloud-native solution that provided agentless, packet-level granularity that security analysts and developers could use to understand risk and break through bottlenecks, as well as detect, investigate, and respond to threats quickly before they compromise their systems or data. He also said that level of granular context, and even in environments where Kubernetes clusters spin up hundreds of thousands of instances at a time, that granular context empowered the security team to support studio developers without looking over their shoulders. So with ReviewX, everyone is working from the same data sets across development, security, IT operations, and making the development process a lot more efficient, as well as reducing tool sprawl. Let's move on to another case study. Zenith is a full service IT firm specializing in information security, governance, risk, and compliance, cloud technology, and managed IT services for commercial enterprises and government agencies. And because Zenith's clients are recognized globally, and they're pretty high profile, they become a tempting target for cyber attacks, especially as these organizations move more applications and data into the cloud. One of today's growing threats are ransomware. Well, as you know that cyber extortion and covert targeted attacks using advanced techniques. These can damage a company's IT system up to or including shutting them down until they find a resolution for it. In highly regulated industries like government agency and corporate enterprises, in industries like finance and healthcare, this is not acceptable, as these organizations are required to meet stringent compliance regulations concerning their data security. So Trend Micro Deep Security and Trend Micro Deep Discovery are Zenith flagship security solutions, and for a good reason. As businesses and organizations ship more of their critical assets to the cloud, Deep Security offers them a highly scalable automated solution that gives these organizations the added security that they need. And what's more, as the popularity of virtualization increased, these cloud platforms like, we talk about AWS, Zenith needed a solution that could deliver security for all environments, physical, virtual, cloud, hybrid, you name it. The Trend Micro Smart Protection Network powers all security solutions, including Deep Discovery, which allows Zenith to create custom defense solutions to detect, analyze, and respond to ransomware, advanced persistent threats, and targeted attacks in real time for their clients. The solutions that we discussed today and many more, they are all available on AWS Marketplace. AWS Marketplace is a curated digital catalog service that simplifies software discovery, procurement, provisioning, and management through features that speed up your product evaluation, improve governance, and cost transparency. And it also enhances control over software spend for you. We have a broad and deep selection of security solutions offered by hundreds of independent software vendors or ISVs, spanning infrastructure security, logging and monitoring, identity and access control, data protection, and more. AWS Marketplace can also enable you to receive quicker time to value and thus ROI with your third-party solutions. There's a recent third-party research. It found that it takes an average of just 27 hours to find, buy, and deploy a solution through AWS Marketplace, compared with 52.4 hours through other procurement sources. And that's an average time saving of 49% for you. The same research also uncovered how AWS customers like yourself felt about their AWS Marketplace purchasing experience compared to other sources. And as you can see on the right chart, a few of the highest rated benefits included cloud readiness of the solutions, time to value, and ROI. AWS Marketplace is also supported by a team of solutions architects, security experts, product specialists, and other humans to help you connect with the right software and resources that you need to prioritize your security operations in your AWS environment. So how can you get started? Let me go back here. There are a wide variety of security solutions available in AWS Marketplace, like the ones that we talk about today, and many of them have free trials. Flexible purchasing options like private offers can help you find the best price and meet your budgetary needs. Deployment options like SaaS, AMI, and CloudFormation templates can also help you rapidly customize and provision software or data products into your environment. So just a quick recap. The rapid pace of business, your business in AWS, has highlighted the need for teams to focus on integrating and automated as many security control options or security tools as possible. To cover your workload or to your infrastructure, not just your workload, you need EDR, but you need more comprehensive security posture in your environment. You need to combine EDR and NDR and next generation SIEM. As you move forward, you can also get in touch with your AWS solutions architect to see how you might best integrate tools or processes to improve your security strategy across your organization's AWS environment. Or you can check out the security tools yourself on AWS Marketplace. Play with them if they have free trials before you engage with your AWS account team or your AWS solutions architect. And with that, I'll pass you back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Nam and Matt, for those great presentations. We do have some questions ready for the Q&A session. A reminder, if anyone has a question for our speakers, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first question is for Matt. Matt, how can we deploy EDR technologies to a cloud asset if we don't control the gold image?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so I did talk a little bit about that during my presentation, where I talked about kind of having a gold image with an agent in place, so that way anything that gets deployed out there. So first off, you can obviously, if you've got something that is running and has some persistence, you could go and put an agent on it afterwards, meaning, kind of take an inventory of the environment, see what's out there, what's running right now, what's the persistence on those things, and then go and get some, monitoring in place. The other possibility is if you've got, an asset which may not be agent friendly, take an S3 bucket, for example. There's obviously logging that could be enabled for that. So you don't necessarily have like a gold image for that. You may have a standard set of policies, but you won't have a gold image for that type of thing. But you could go and rely on the robust logging available to get some data in there. The last thing I'll add to this too is for those assets that, let's say you deploy a bunch of assets in 1 month, and then the next month is when you start to deploy your security stack. Obviously, take a look and see if you've got some historical logs that you could rely on to get some insight into activities prior to you having that EDR or NDR visibility.
Thanks, Matt. Nam, we have a question for you. Why do I need to use EDR instead of traditional antivirus in my AWS environment?
It's the evolution, right? Traditional antivirus works by saying, I know this virus, I've seen it before, and then it moves to block it from moving across or expanding your system. But if the virus is new or not known to an antivirus software, that's a gap in protection. And that's why EDR comes in. So rather than focusing on prior knowledge of a virus, it focuses on the symptoms that all viruses have in common. For example, code execution, persistence, stealth, command control, and lateral movement. And based on these factors, it let you know how to quarantine, investigate, and adjust your protection accordingly. NDR enables analysis of the unknown in real time, and it does that by correlating the file's behavior to own endpoint it covers. So it delivers a larger benchmark of what normal behavior is to measure against. Some EDR players like CrowdStrike analyze over 1 trillion inputs each day with crowdsourcing in their intelligence feed. The longer you use EDR tool, the more accurate it will be in spotting anomalies in your environment. And EDR tools can supplement and complement your existing antivirus. You have tools looking for both the known and unknown real time. And part of a good strategy is to employ a combination of EDR, traditional antivirus, and NDR solutions to help mitigate the threat risk.
Thanks, Nam. Matt, we have another question for you. How is NDR technology different from capturing packets or monitoring traffic flows?
Oh, yeah, good question. So It's actually kind of similar to what Nam was just saying as well. It's different types of telemetry, or you're looking at your telemetry a little bit differently. First off, I would argue that capturing packets, just simply capturing traffic, in AWS for the purposes of capturing traffic would be a very, very tough feat to get past. I do not recommend going through that because it's a lot of traffic out there. Number one. Number two, NDR is meant to help kind of, I think, find the needles in the haystack, for lack of a better proverbial term. To go through all the data that's coming through and utilize some of those advanced detection capabilities to actually highlight, here's what's going on in the network traffic, here's what you need to care about, here's what your team should focus on, and kind of go from there. So use that to your advantage. So I view it very similar to Nam's explanation of EDR versus AV. It's much more granular telemetry, but it's much more focused telemetry, and it guides you exactly towards, hey, there might be a threat here, as opposed to here's all your traffic, good luck figuring out if there's something wrong or not.
Thanks, Matt. Nam, what are the options from AWS to help with disaster recovery and backup needs that can work well with EDR, NDR?
Yeah, backup, disaster recovery and backup is always, that's the insurance plan, right? EDR and NDR is for your protection, but if something happened, then you need to have disaster recovery and backup strategy in place. AWS has multiple options to help you with your DR and backup needs. But a good starting point for customers with critical workloads is AWS Elastic Disaster Recovery Service, or DRS, Elastic Disaster Recovery Service. So why is DRS a good starting point for you? It is flexible. It allows you to work with any source infrastructure, from a wide range of Windows and Linux operating systems, or even older systems. And it has the ability to not only fail over from these sources, but fail back to them once the threat has been eliminated or addressed. And secondly, it's reliable. DRS makes sure that installation and operation is non-disruptive to your environment. So it really reduces downtime in the event of breach and allows you to continue operations while you remediate the threat. And finally, it allows you to use it pretty easily, actually, very simple. Testing in a sandbox environment to make sure that you can run drills, and then you save your money through leveraging low cache elastic storage and automated disk selection. Creating an orchestration layer between your DR and EDR and NDR, it can become very beneficial for you. Many of these organizations, many customers today face similar challenges with their recovery plans, because the plan was created by a few senior folks, and they have tribal knowledge of the plan, and the rest of the team, the company, doesn't really know how to execute that failover plan. And training and enabling new team members can be pretty challenging if your runbook is too custom, which means it contains custom scripts and process workflows. So that's why DRS, AWS DRS, Disaster Recovery Service, is a good starting point for you to combine that with your EDR and ADR for your phone protection.
Matt, are there any benefits to a divided security approach? Let cloud be cloud and on-prem be on-prem.
Oh, good question. Someone's going after my goal of combination. Personally, depending on the size of the, I'd say depending on the size of the environment, would maybe be one reason you want to isolate the two. I'd also say segregated security responsibilities. So, if you've got a team that is dedicated towards cloud and they work with the development team, and they're very, very well rooted in there, and the organization is big enough that it makes sense to just kind of have a dedicated cloud team versus a dedicated on-prem team, I'd say so. I have seen some organizations where the organization is moving services to the cloud, and they kind of have like I'm not a fan of this term, but they have like a tiger team who goes after and their goal is to kind of build that security model and then rope everyone else in. So I'd call that maybe a temporary divide between the two. But you know, if I've got an enterprise that's just kind of humming along, and you know, we're not really changing too much, and we've got this big footprint with a, you know, a great understanding of one and a divided understanding, or a limited understanding of the other, I'd say no, I don't think it's beneficial in that case. I'd try and unify those as much as possible. Again, this also depends on how the environments are used, what that looks like from an employee perspective, from a user perspective, and also from an actor perspective as well. But yeah, I'd say try and unify them to the best of your ability. If they are separate, understand, are you creating any gaps by having them separate? And how do we go about mitigating or closing those?
Thank you, Matt. That is all the time we have for Q&A. Thank you so much to our speakers for your great presentations, and thanks to AWS Marketplace for sponsoring this webcast and the entire security series. To our audience, please remember you can also complete the survey that will be sent out at the end of this webinar if you wish to learn more about any specific solutions that were mentioned. We greatly appreciate your listening in, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar in this cloud security series.